Hello, Mr. Samir.
Hi,
And
hi, Amy. How are
Raleigh.
you?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good evening to both of you. Thank you so much for joining in early. My name is Amy, and I'll be representing Migrant Career Support Trust today. And we have two experts with us, Mr. Samir Rai and Dr. Shirali Arya. They'll be joining for today's webinar. I'll just ask Mr. Samir Rai to unmute and he can go ahead with today's session. So I'll just briefly go through what today's webinar will be. So today's webinar is about employment regulations in New Zealand. So that will be our first topic we will be covering today. And I'll just read out what our expert, Mr. Samir Rai. So at least our participants, they know that who he is and what is his background. So Mr. Samir Rai is in the final year of LLB honors and worked in diverse verticals encompassing digital printing and document solutions, education, engineering consulting, contracting, project management, and technical event management. His skills may be categorized in the areas of project management, business development, administration, recruitment, and implementing and adopting new technologies to suit the operational needs. So we are really thankful for you to be here. So thank you so much, Mr. Samirai, to join in. I'll just ask you to go ahead with the session.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Uh, Thank you so much to Migrant Career Support Trust for giving us an opportunity to basically share our thoughts on employment regulations in New Zealand. So what I'll do is I'll share the screen now and to share the presentation. So yeah, it's about employment rights and responsibilities. So the moment we talk about employment, there are two main parties involved. One is the employer who employs the person who is called as employee. Now, it is very important that, like we understand what exactly are the minimum employment rights, what are the employment relationship problems, and what are the information and support, because a lot of people have experienced that many a times the right kind of information is not available to the employees, and hence there arises a lot of issues and problems. So very quickly about employment New Zealand, like it gives a lot of information. So I'll request the participants, whenever you have time, visit their website and scout through the information. You'll get a lot of information, a lot of awareness about what are your rights, what are the information available. And if you feel that there is something lacking, just shoot them an email, and trust me, they basically give you with a lot of information. Now, straight away, like talking about the objective, and the keywords are fair business and fair workplaces for the employees and employers both. But despite that, what happens is there are a lot of issues, starting from lack of employment agreements. You talk to the employees and they will talk about, yes, I started working, but unfortunately, I was never given any employment contract. And many a times we have seen that, just on the verbal agreement, the work has proceeded. In New Zealand, can there be a verbal contract? Oh, yes, there can be, but not in case of employment contracts. The law is very clear about it, that you must have employment agreement. So please be aware of this is the starting point. There is no other question about it, whether you should have it or not. You must have it. Employees made casuals. Like many a times you start working as a part-timer or a full-timer, And then employees are made casuals by giving certain reasons, which sometimes employees don't understand. And they feel that somehow they are at the receiving end, which is not right. Because remember those, like two keywords, fair workplace, and your, like the overall growth has to be in such a way which should be beneficial for both employees and employers both. One party cannot benefit, like at the cost of other. Use of contractor model. This is another one where like people have been asked to go for a contractor model rather than being an employee. We'll briefly talk about it in the following slides. Talking about annual leave, public holidays. What are your entitlements? What are your rights, minimum rights? So we'll talk about that as well. Resignation, again, like sometimes you start working, you work for months or weeks or maybe a few years, and then you want to part ways. What things have to be taken care of? What are your rights as an employee? So you need to be aware of that. Wage subsidy and complaints, to be very frank, now today we won't touch on this because we have left COVID behind us. And wage subsidy has, but still there are some issues which is still ongoing, but we won't touch on that because we leave Employment Relations Authority and the court to decide on that. Redundancy. You are being made redundant because one of the department is closing. It's going to be non-functional, or the business is being sold to someone else. What are your rights? And the most unfortunate one, migrant exploitation, which some of us may have experienced it, unfortunately. Some of us may have seen others getting exploited. So these are, and when we talk about migrant exploitation, we are talking about a lot of areas are there, but the three important areas which as an employee you should be aware of. An employer bullies or threatens you. No one can do it. You have the right to be safeguarded. And when I say you have the right to be safeguarded, whenever you get time, my request is go to New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. There is your right. A lot of people have not read it. Just go through that, read the legislation, and you will realize that why you have the right to be treated with respect and treated, like fairly at all times. Your employer asks you to pay money to them to support your future visa application or residency. We have read so many reports in the newspaper. And this is a very troubling one for the courts, for the government, and for the society as a whole. So this is something which you must be aware of. You do not receive the same minimum employment rights as New Zealanders employed by the same company. I remember in one of our employment law classes, our professor said a very beautiful thing. If you are working in New Zealand, you are on a work visa, or you are a residence permit holder, or you are a citizen, they have the same rights as far as the employment is concerned. There can be no differentiation, there can be no segregation under any circumstances. And if it is happening, well, this is something which you should note and you should seek help. So always be aware of these areas. And there is something called Human Rights Act as well, where the discrimination takes place. We'll leave that because, we have got 35 minutes for this presentation. So that is a subject in itself. But then, remember that is also there, where you cannot be discriminated based on anything. It can be your political belief, religion, color, nationality, ethnicity, doesn't make any difference. Now, all employees in New Zealand have minimum employment rights. Now, what are they? So, talking about first, who's an employee? Well, as an employee, I'm ready to offer my services. And for offering that services, I want to receive some payments. Now, that payment can be wages, salary, commission, or piece rates. It can be anything. And it's a very simple formula. There is no complication in this. How do you define employee? Well, they can be full-time, they can be fixed term, they can be seasonal, casual. I think we have given the whole list. Even if in early childhood, there are home workers. Well, it is absolutely fine. You are still an employee. But remember one thing, who's not an employee, a self-employed person. Well, if you are being self-employed, it's your choice. But if the employer is basically giving you an option to become an independent contractor, please be very careful before you choose this option. Why? Because the moment you become independent contractor, you forego your minimum employment rights. There can be certain explanations like, you'll be saving taxes and stuff like that. Trust me, it never happens. We are not talking about a multi-million-dollar, account. We are talking about employment salary, and the salary may range from something like, $60,000, $60,000 to say something, or $50,000 to up to say $150,000, $200,000, or $500,000. The moment, and there have been cases when some of the employees have been asked to become independent contractor, and when they became, they were not aware of the GST obligation. The moment you start earning more than 60, you have to comply for the GST. They were not aware of it. They billed $90,000, which is $30,000 extra of the minimum limit. They were liable for $4,500 GST payment to IRD. So again, cutting the whole thing short now, the whole idea is the moment you're talking about independent contractor, self-employed, please understand that these are red flags for you as an employee. Unless and until you make an informed choice that, yes, this is what I want to be. I want to be my own. I want to make my own decision. And people who are basically either residence permit holder or citizens, they can be independent contractor, but I don't think there are any work visas which support independent contractors at this point of time. So you have to be very, very careful about that. Again, the concept of volunteer. So make sure that in your employment agreement, these terms are not there. And if it is there, please seek help from a qualified agency. Talking about the key minimum employee rights, we're talking about minimum wage now. Most of you must be aware because it was there in the news. So 22.7, there is no, like a negotiation in these things. 12 public holidays per year, there is no negotiation. 4 weeks paid annual holiday per year after 12 months, there's no negotiation. Well, there have been questions about annual holidays. How can I take it? When can I take it? Can I refuse my employer to basically, like when the employer is asking me to take, say, 2 weeks leave at this particular point of time, what are my rights? So those are the questions. When the moment these kind of issues arises, you have your rights. You can always ask question. The employer has to inform you well in advance, and you should be acceptable. You should accept that particular decision. But can I bluntly keep on refusing it all as and when required? No, because employer also has certain rights. So the best option is always try to find a kind of a convenient path where the dispute can be avoided, which is beneficial for a healthy environment for employer and employee both. Sick leave 10 days per year after 6 months of your service, you are entitled for that. This is again your minimum employee rights. Then we are talking about bereavement leaves. So 3 days, you are entitled for 3 days leave after 6 months of your service if there is an immediate family member, loss of immediate family member. So, like you are entitled for that. But you have a close friend, like unfortunately something has happened, and like then definitely you are entitled for a 1 day leave. The only thing is that you may have to prove to your employer that, look, this person was close to me, and it has to be accepted by your employer. But as far as the 3 days leaves are concerned, you have to just prove that it's basically your immediate family member. And under the law, there is a clear-cut definition of what constitutes of immediate family members. There's a complete list. There is a domestic violence leave, which was recently it was introduced last year, I believe 2 years back, the 10 days per year after 6 months of your service. Rest and meal breaks. Again, there has been a lot of issues about this as well. Now, these are your rights. To be very frank, rest and meal breaks are also very important. It depends on because what happens is, if you're doing something and if you commit a mistake, you have to understand that you will be liable for that mistake. So the best option is, if there is a rest break, please utilize it. And be fresh after your 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The whole idea is that they can then, once you basically take those breaks, you are fresh, you go back to your work again, you do well. Talking about the unions, some of the large organizations will have unions. Well, no one can stop you. Employees have the right to join a union. Now, dismissal and redundancy. Can I be dismissed? Can I be made redundant? Yes, it is. You can be made redundant. You can be dismissed. But employer will have to always show that a fair and proper process has been followed. It cannot be under the whims and fancies of the employers. Please remember that. I had a heated discussion with my employer and I was fired. No, you cannot be. If that has happened, it's a matter of personal grievance, and you can raise it to the right kind of authority to be addressed. Now, the employer responsibilities. We have just listed it down for, the employees, because you have to understand what their responsibilities are. Well, as we talked earlier, also provide employees with a written employment agreement, provide a safe workplace, not bully, discriminate, or sexually or racially harass employees, follow a fair process if taking any disciplinary action, maintain wage and time records and holiday and leave periods, provide employees with their minimum entitlements. We have already talked about it. What are they? So yes, so these are things, which employer must comply with. I'm just showing you a kind of an employment agreement. What exactly is there? Now, if you go to the Employment New Zealand website, there is an employment agreement builder as well. So though you are an employee, but still just give it a try and you can find out that it gives you a lot of information. It's talking about name of employee and employer. It has to be clearly mentioned. Job description has to be part of it. Place of work, hours of work, wages, salary, time and a half. About if you're working on weekends, especially if you're in retail area, where you are asked to basically work on weekends or more than 8 hours per day. Employee protection provision, resolving employment problems. Now, definitely when you're working, there may be certain issues, either sometimes with your colleagues, sometimes with your subordinates, or sometimes with your reporting authority, your manager. But there has to be a mechanism how exactly you are going to solve it. And sometimes people, like ask me, what is the first point of contact? What is the starting point? The starting point is talk to your manager or employer. That is the first point. Try to resolve it over there. And if it doesn't get resolved, well, then you take the next step. Now, when we are talking about resolving employment problems, so as I mentioned, talk to your employer as soon as possible. And many a times when I talk to a lot of candidates, and the feedback what we get is, if I raise my voice, if I raise an issue, I will be perceived as a troublemaker. No, you are not. No, you are not. And if someone does it, well, then that person is wrong. You are not wrong. You have to understand that. You have an issue, and if you're not happy about it, please do bring it to the notice of your manager or the employer and try to resolve it. And there are only two steps. One is the employer or the manager will show you the whole picture, and they will try to basically help you out. Or if they are very stubborn about things, well, then you have you can take the next step. And in Employment New Zealand, there is something called early resolution, where you basically give them a call, 0800 number, give them a call, or they have an online form as well. Fill up all the details, facts as much as possible, and try to basically bring all the facts and issues to their attention. And most of the times they will basically try to help you out. One, whether your rights are being breached by someone else, like employer, and if so, they will tell you, like, look, these are the things, and sometimes they may even talk. Second is, they basically say, look, this has gone beyond a certain point. We need to basically sort the issue out by talking to each other, and then mediation takes place. Or there are some serious breaches which employer must not have done. It gets referred to the labor inspector then. So the issue will be either resolved through the mediation process or by the labor inspector. And if not, the issue automatically is escalated to Employment Relations Authority. So this is how the step will be. I'm not saying that you are going to complete the whole round, but the whole thing is you should be aware of the process, how it is basically going to, how exactly it is going to affect you. And the best option is, if there is an issue, try to basically bring it attention to the relevant people. Now, if you go to the Employment New Zealand website, there are a lot of publications. I'm not going into detail, but I think that can be a good, and there are a lot of translated resources. They've got a lot of booklets and, quick guides. Just whenever you get time, my recommendation is try to basically get as much information as you can. And we have provided you with, the phone numbers where we talk about the general inquiry and then the reporting the migrant exploitation. There are two numbers given for that. Sorry about that. And then we are talking about the employment learning modules. It's on the Employment New Zealand website. You have got plenty of learning modules. My request is, whenever you can, and there are learning modules for employees and employers both. So whenever you get time, try to basically pick up one of the module and, just try to cover up as much as you can. And this is a typical certificate you get, when you complete something. And this, I think we have talked about what sort of courses are available. I'm not going into detail, but then, yeah, that is for your self-reading. Yeah, any questions?
Thank you, Samir. That was, I think, a very good discussion around that. If there are any questions, you can ask now, or you can put on the chat. and we can even send it later to Samir. So Samir, one of the very important things that you mentioned was about how the need to address issues with your manager, and I think that's where a lot of migrants feel shy, and or sometimes they feel scared that what will happen if I do this, what will happen if I do that.
Yeah.
So, what is the right way to, even if someone is shy, because most of the time it will be your immediate, boss that you will be in tussle with. So, how do you manage that? Can you guide us on that?
Yeah, see, many a times as an employee, as a
Yeah.
person, like
Yeah.
Gary, what happens is I may have to decide, am I a good speaker or am I
Hmm.
good in writing?
Hmm.
And based on that, like you should basically take a call whether I should have,
Hmm.
one-to-one talking or
Yeah.
I should
Yeah.
write an
Okay.
email.
Okay.
Being a law student,
Hmm.
my advice is
Hmm.
write an email,
Hmm. Yeah.
write a text,
Yes.
a record. I'm not saying that
Yes. Yes.
employee will have to put their employer down sometime. No, not that.
Hmm.
But you know what?
Hmm. Yeah.
People have very short-lived memory, employee
Yeah.
and employer both.
Both. Yeah. No, very right.
And
And
the
many
moment
times when you
you give
write,
them,
things
yeah, the
become
moment,
clearer in your mind as well.
yes, yes,
What is the real issue you're talking about? And
yes,
then in the heat of the moment, you may say something which you may not want to
absolutely,
say. And
absolutely.
you may want to, you may regret it later. So I think, yes, you're right. We try and write down whatever are the key facts and stick to the facts, I guess.
Another advice is in the evening, something has happened in the company and I'm feeling very bad about it. I'm speaking as if
Yeah.
I'm an employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gary, like the human reaction is I'll
Hmm.
immediately open my email and I'll start writing or
Hmm.
pick up my phone, I'll
Hmm.
start talking. Don't do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Drink a glass of water, enjoy your tea,
Hmm.
enjoy your dinner,
Hmm.
try to
Hmm.
sleep. In the morning,
Hmm.
get up, you do that.
Yeah,
And trust
correct.
me,
Yeah.
you write two different emails at two different time, the content would be very different.
Very true. So I can share a trade secret that I do sometimes when I get very pissed off with someone or some even clients or something. So I just write the email and I don't send it. I keep it in draft.
And I believe
and
that.
that has really helped me sometimes. And in the morning I was like, oh my God, what was I writing?
I know.
So I know those things happen. So we are running short of time, and we have Shirali also waiting for us. So thank you, Samir, on this, and we will share your details with everyone who's registered. I think many people couldn't come right now, so if they have any issues, I'm sure they can contact you, and you can be a good advisor as well.